Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Well, I spent the last 10 years of my life working as a professional grower on a large scale, growing crops in the many thousands. It's a little different now that I'm working just for myself on the farm, looking at crops that it might be in 50 pots or 100 pots, but the process is the same. I'm going to take a walk now. I want to take you with me and show you what I'm looking for through the eyes of a grower. Now you may ask, what's different between a gardener and a grower? Not much, actually. You're still going to be looking for a lot of the same things. Is the plant growing well? Also, does it need water? So those two things are really the same. But other things you're looking for as a grower, you're trying to decide about the process of what kind of work you need to do on a crop and how close is it to being ready for sales, ready for shipping. Is it on track? Is there anything I need to do right now in terms of fertilizing, pinching, or other crop work that I would look to do today that might make the plant a better plant in 3 to 4 weeks when I want to sell it? I'll get a closer look at some of these in a minute, but overview, it's important to know what stage your plants are coming from. All of these were pretty much potted in the last 2 to 4 weeks, with just a couple of exceptions. We had some late bare root come in, so I had some go in just yesterday. That's this crop here. And so let's have a closer look at some of these crops. Whenever I've visited successful growers, you can tell they're itching to get their hands in the dirt, and one of the things they do regularly is they tip plants out of their pots. This one here has been in a pot for 3 to 4 weeks, and I can see some top growth on it, but I won't know how healthy it is unless I tip it out of its pot. So you gently turn it upside down, the soil will hold together, hopefully, and what you can see is that there's a nice white healthy root mass going on here. So even though the top growth, I'm only seeing just a little bit of fresh green in the center here, it actually had all of these leaves around the side here when it went in, but even though it's only done a little bit of growth on the top, I can assess this and see that it's well established, rooted to the sides and bottom of the pot, and that means that pretty quickly here it will take off. So good job on this one. Let's look at some plants that were put in from plugs. Now, the nice thing about plants that are produced by cuttings is that they're fairly uniform. So you can see across this that stage of growth is about the same as that stage of growth, is about the same as that stage of the growth, all the way from the front to the back of the crop. And that is true of plants that are generally true of plants that are grown from cuttings because they are genetic clones of each other. So they should grow at about the same pace and take on about the same habit. And looking over at the next crop, this one's also nice and uniform. This is a white lavender intermedia. And again, pretty much all growing at about the same stage. Now, one thing I'm watching for is I'm watching for deads. You see the pot in the middle of your screen there, the plant didn't make it. Now, when I see a dead plant in the crop, it is not time to pull my hair out and panic. It's time to kind of look around and see what I can see in the crop otherwise. I mean, the rest of the crop is pretty good. A small failure rate, 1 plant out of 100, is nothing to get panicked about. If I saw that there were a bunch of deads along the front row or the side rows, I might consider that being watering because the edges of the crop are more susceptible to drying out than the center of the crop. But in this case, the fact that it's just on the edge and it's the only plant doesn't tell me much. So mental note, but I'll probably just take the plant out and throw it away. I'll tip these out of the pots as well later so you can see what's happening at the roots, because it really doesn't look like a lot is happening on the top here. They went in as plugs, and plants will do this thing where they put all of their energy into growing downwards and establishing a big root system before they do much in the way of top growth. So here you can see I put in 2 plugs. They were smaller when they went in, but they paused, and you can see this is a very big pot. So as I pull it out of the pot here and show you the roots, you can see actually it's done a great job of throwing roots down, about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way down this pot. As soon as it fills it up to the sides and bottom, it knows what it has to do to work with, and then it will start expanding outwards and upwards. Here's another one, very uniform, all the way from the front to the back. I think I'm starting to see some new growth on that. Assessing the color of the foliage for nutrient value, that's something you can do, although it can be a little deceptive. This Agastaki is yellow in color. The flowers are yellow, and typically you'll see that the foliage is a little bit paler in the yellower varieties. So it's hard for me to tell whether this is nutrient deficient, but I'm going to swing around here, hopefully not too fast to make you dizzy, and I'm going to show you that on this crop here, these ones took some good foliage growth very early on, and you can see that the leaves are a little bit on that chartreuse side. It's sort of like yellow in the center there. The lower leaves are a little darker, and then the top growth, the middle leaves, the newer leaves are a little bit paler. That's probably an indication that it's a bit hungry. I'm going to show you one other one here, just swinging over to the right to give you another example. Here's another one that grew quickly, because that's what digitalis does. It grows very, very quickly once it's establishing, and you can see that it, like the other ones, are a little bit yellowish, meaning they've probably run out of food energy. Whereas, and I'm going to go back here to another crop, this one here is a Leucanthemum. It hasn't had that growth spurt yet, and it's just fine with the amount of nutrients that it has in the soil. It's still a mid-green color in the foliage. That's all a little deceptive. I give you the caution that the varieties do vary quite a lot in what color their foliage should look like, but you get a feel for that as you start looking around the crops. This one here, I think it's time to get some extra fertilizer into it. So this is coming along. This is a carnation or dianthus, and you can see that although the plant has not bulked out to the edge of the pot yet, that it's starting to flower. You can see it's throwing on flower buds there on a plant that really isn't ready for it in a way. I mean, it hasn't bulked out, hasn't filled out the pot. In terms of selling that, the customer is going to be a little bit disappointed with the size of the plant in that pot. So what I'm going to do, because it's thinking about flowering, is I'm going to pinch it. Just going to reach in here and pinch off some of those flower buds. And what that should do is, and you know, if you had trimmers on you, you'd probably do a cleaner cut just to make it, you know, less the fingernail thing. But what that should do is force the energy of the growth back down into the base of the plant and have it bulk out and send more shoots from the base and fill out that pot a little bit more. So that's what I would do to all of these, is I would be pinching off the flowers at this stage, because the plants are a little bit small yet for retail. Speaking of pinching, here's a case in point of why we pinch, and to get that extra bulk to the plant. These plants want to grow straight up. This is the Heliopsis bleeding hearts. I featured it in a video a while back, and I grew it from seed, and it wanted to grow straight up. So I went ahead and pinched, and I hope you can see in the crook of the plant there that we pinched off the growing tip, and at the top there it's thrown 2 side shoots. But if I go a little further down, you're going to see the same thing has happened down low, is that pinch at the top has encouraged 2 more side shoots down low. So ultimately, you might end up with 4 shoots or 4 stems going upwards, rather than just the one single straggly stem, which will give your customers a much better appreciation of the plant. I mean, it's going to be a wonderful plant in the landscape anyway, eventually, but by pinching it at this stage, you're able to offer a better value and a much nicer looking perennial to your customer. Another crop decision I'm going to make here is I'm going to move this candy tuft, this iberis, outdoors. The reason I'm going to do that is because, number one, I've looked at the roots and it's well established. Number two, I'm looking at the branching on there, and I don't think it actually needs additional branching. I've done the pinching early on and it's built up a good form to the plant. They are still a little bit small, but iberis is the kind of plant that appreciates cooler temperatures. And because I'm trying to push everything else in this greenhouse, I'm trying to get it to grow, keeping the iberis in here in warmer temperatures than it would like will eventually encourage stretch in these plants and kind of a lusher growth than I'd like to see. So I'm going to move these outside into one of my outdoor beds, and that way it will get the cooler temperatures it wants and develop into a nicer looking perennial. So remember I said that plants produced by cuttings tend to be very, very uniform. This is the flip side of that. All of these columbines are produced by seed, and you can see how not uniform they are. You can see that this one's super tall, this one back here is super short. The colors of the flowers, I can already tell, even at this earliest stage, that this one is going to be a darker purple or blue, and that something like this right beside it is going to be white or yellow, or maybe a light pink. And so looking at this crop, the whole thing is quite different, and that's what you get when you get a seed-grown crop. And you'll also note that I've already placed these outside in the outdoor bed. Keeping them in the greenhouse just would have encouraged stretch at this point. They're happier out here in the cooler temperatures. And the final thing I'll say about them is that they are saleable size. You know, they've grown over the winter, and I kept them in a small size. I up-potted them, just 4 weeks ago. So they were freshly potted that short a time ago, and they filled the pot. They've got lots of foliage on there. They're satisfactory to my customers, and they're just going into flower now, which should cause quite a stir when I have customers come through here and see how nice they look. Here in one of our outdoor selling areas, I've placed the plants that I think are large enough and ready for sale. And certainly if they filled the pots like these, or they have flowers on them, and they look like they'd be attractive for selling, I'll place them out for retail sale. One thing I note on these, and just looking over the top of the tag there, is that some of these have spent flowers. And I know from experience on this plant that if I pull off or deadhead those spent flowers, that I can get them to bloom again in short order. So that's what I'll be doing on these ones. One other thing I'll notice is at the very back here, there's one pot that looks like it's shriveling around the base and melting down. That one has probably rotted, crown rot of some sort. Once again, I don't get too hung up if we're talking about one plant amongst 12 here, and overall my losses in the greenhouse right now are very, very low. So I won't overthink it. I'll just pull that one out, dump it, and leave the rest for sale because I don't suspect there's anything widespread going on here. Quick thing as I look at these red flowering currants out in this bed here, as I place the plants outdoors, inside the greenhouse I've been giving them liquid feed fertilizer. As I place them outdoors here, we've been placing a scoop of fertilizer. That's the gray stuff, and that's the slow release container fertilizer that I've placed in the base of the pot. In this case, about a tablespoon per pot, and just a light feeding as they go out and go into the rain, and that way they have some kind of source of regular fertilization. But one thing that I will note here is that we had some wind in the past couple of days, and definitely it looks to me like that pot has tipped over and that we've pulled it and picked it up and so on, and so that fertilizer is now sitting on the ground cloth rather than in the pot. So that's something we just want to watch for and replace. And I don't know what we can do to keep these pots from tipping in the wind. It was kind of an unusual wind for our area, but you know, you get spring storms anyway. So maybe there's a way to wedge a board up against that or some kind of support so that the pots aren't so easy to tip. But that is a very common problem in the nursery business. Of course, I'm also looking for pests at the same time, and here amongst my newly potted roses, it's usually not any harder than looking for the juiciest, fastest growing tips of the plant and see if you've developed some aphids on there. And this one, I can see a few there. Don't know if I'll be able to get them in focus on this shot. What I'm also seeing on some of these plants is a touch of powdery mildew on the leaves. Nothing severe yet, but both that and the aphids are something to keep an eye on as I grow this. The other thing to know about these roses, particularly, I'm just going to take an overview of the whole crop here, and I don't know if you'll be able to spot the same thing I am, but I see that they are looking like they're shooting upwards in the warmth of the greenhouse, and they're not branching as much down low as I'd like to see. So what I'm going to do is the same thing I was talking about on the other crops, is just doing a pinch off of some of that top growth so that it will encourage these roses to start bushing out at the base. One last crop on the inside here, and once again I'm going to point at the fact that these were started from seed, and so you can see that some of them have taken off super fast. This is a Achillea tarmica, the pearl, and some of them took off super fast, and then other ones are just wee and shrimpy and are taking a long time to take off. Something that I should have done more vigorously this year as I was planting these is maybe weeded out some of those tiny ones before I potted them. I'd rather have them all come into size around the same time. I guess, you know, there's no harm in having these small ones here, but it does mean that as customers are in here and looking around at our plants, and I try to warn them as they're coming into this growing greenhouse, yeah, not everything's up to size, but I'm worried that it can give a bad impression. Also, having irregular sizes in your crops can affect your watering. And obviously, and now I'm looking at the whole greenhouse, when I have a plant that has that much foliage on it and is growing quickly, right beside a plant that is coming from bare root, it's fresh potting and doesn't need a whole lot more water right now, I'm going to have to water these individually anyway, all of these crops in this greenhouse. But when I have plants within a crop that are shrimpy and tiny, and then other plants that are large and beefy and are going to approach selling size within the next few weeks, I just don't want to have that kind of lack of uniformity in the crop. So maybe it's easier at that point to just not pot the tiny ones, the runts, and have a more uniform crop. All right, that's it for the tour of my crops, as modest as they are this early in the season. Obviously, they'll grow up, and I'll show you some updates throughout the season as they grow. But thank you for joining me, and if you have any questions about the kinds of things that growers are looking for in their crops, or anything to do with horticulture, please feel free to drop those into the comments below the video, and I'll see what I can do to help.